Have you ever found yourself stuck in that confusing place, wondering if he's still interested, or worse, if he's just moved on? Maybe you're sitting there, scrolling through your phone, caught between the urge to reach out and the fear of looking too eager. The truth is, sometimes the signs aren't shouted out loud. They're subtle, silent, almost invisible if you don't know where to look. But here's the secret. He might actually be waiting for you to make the first move, quietly hoping you'll break the silence. Think about it. When a guy ends a conversation with a phrase like, "talk soon," or "let me know," he's not just being polite. He's leaving the door wide open for you. And if you've noticed him showing up on your social media, watching your stories but never starting the chat, that's him testing the waters and hoping you'll take the lead. Maybe he brings up inside jokes or memories only you two share. That's his way of emotionally reconnecting, reminding you both of something special, even if he's too scared to say it outright. And if he's not dating anyone else, not flirting publicly, it's a sign he's emotionally paused, waiting to see if you'll come back. Sometimes he won't even reach out directly. Instead, he'll check in through mutual friends, quietly trying to find out how you're doing without exposing his own feelings. But the most telling sign, when you finally do reach out and he responds instantly with warmth, energy, and relief, that's when you know for sure he's been waiting for you all along. Curious to know more? Let's dive in. You ever notice how some conversations don't really end? Like they technically do. You say goodbye, maybe a talk soon, or even a catch you later, but it doesn't feel final. That's not an accident. That's a deliberate choice. When a guy leaves things open-ended, he's planting a seed. He's hoping you'll water it. Let me explain what I mean. Most people, when they're done with something, whether it's a conversation, a relationship, or even just a moment, they close it off. They wrap it up with something definitive, like, "all right, take care," or "good luck with everything," a full stop. That's punctuation. And what that tells you is, this chapter is done, I've closed the book, and I'm moving on. But when someone ends a conversation in a way that invites continuation, that's a dot, not a period. He's saying, "I'm still here in case you want to pick this up again." So maybe the last time you spoke, it was light, maybe even fun, nothing dramatic. He didn't make a big emotional speech, didn't say he missed you in bold letters, but the way he signed off, that was the tell. "Let me know when you're free. We should catch up soon. Talk to me if you need anything." He's not just being polite. He's giving you a green light, a subtle one you might miss if you're only looking for grand gestures. Now, this is important because this is where a lot of people get stuck. They assume that if he really wanted to talk, he'd message first. That if he cared, he'd chase. But people aren't always that simple, especially when emotions are involved. Sometimes a guy is waiting because he's unsure. He doesn't want to come on too strong. Maybe there's been some distance or something unspoken hanging between you two. Maybe he's worried that reaching out will make him look needy or worse, get rejected. So instead of charging through the door, he just leaves it open. Not because he doesn't want you, but because he's hoping you'll walk in. And here's the kicker. It's working because now you're thinking about it. You're asking, is he waiting for me to text first? That means that little parting phrase, it stayed with you. That half invitation, that unfinished moment, it lingered. That's intentional. He wants you to reach out, but he doesn't want to make it too obvious. He's testing the waters without jumping in. So the question becomes, how do you respond? Because this isn't about playing games. It's about understanding the message behind the message. If someone ends things with a door left slightly, here's what I want you to remember. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Sometimes making the first move, sending that message, picking up the phone isn't about chasing someone. It's about giving both of you a chance to reconnect, a chance to see if the spark is still there, a chance to finish the sentence he left half written. Because people communicate in more ways than words. His choice to leave things open-ended That's communication. That's his way of saying, this doesn't feel over to me. And if you feel the same, then you have nothing to lose by responding. You don't need to make a grand gesture. You don't need to pour out your emotions. You just need to lean in even a little, because sometimes that's all it takes to break the silence. A little courage, a little curiosity, one message that says, I'm still thinking about you too. And maybe that's exactly what he's been waiting for. You know, one of the most confusing situations we find ourselves in is when someone's present in our world, but not really present. They don't message you directly. They don't initiate a conversation. They don't ask how you're doing. And yet, every time you post a story, there they are, watching it, liking it, sometimes reacting to it, but never actually starting anything. Now listen, I want to be really clear about this. People don't accidentally engage with your content consistently. If he's watching your stories moments after you post them regularly, it's not just coincidence, it's intentional. And it's important to ask yourself, why? Because when someone is genuinely disinterested, they slowly disappear. They stop watching, they stop liking, and they move on. But when he's there watching silently from the sidelines, it's often a sign he's waiting but not brave enough to go first. What's going on here is that he's creating a presence in your life without taking the risk of rejection. It's the digital version of sitting near someone at a party, hoping they'll come talk to you. He wants you to notice him. He wants you to see that he's still around. He may not be saying it outright, but what he is saying through that little viewed icon is, hey, I'm still paying attention. And that's not nothing. This behavior, this passive interest, can feel maddening. It's like he's dangling his attention in front of you without following through. But the truth is, it tells you a lot. It tells you that he's thinking about you, that there's still a thread of connection he hasn't cut, but it also tells you something about where he's at emotionally. He's curious, he's maybe even hopeful, but he's also uncertain. Uncertain about whether you'd welcome him back, uncertain if you'd even reply, uncertain whether your silence is indifference or self-protection. So he watches and waits. Now, I get it. It's tempting to think, well, if he's waiting, why doesn't he just reach out? And you'd be right to ask that, but not everyone has the courage to be that vulnerable, especially if there's a history, especially if they were the ones who ended things or messed up or simply left things ambiguous. Sometimes watching your story is all they can bring themselves to do without feeling like they're fully putting themselves out there again. And let's be honest, he might even be hoping you break the silence, that you'll take the story view as a green light, that you'll message him. It's a subtle power move in a way, but more than that, it's fear management. He's staying visible while keeping his ego safe. And that's something we've all done in some way. We hover near what we miss, hoping the other person takes the first step. So if he's doing this, it's not necessarily manipulation. It's more often vulnerability dressed up as detachment. But here's the key. You don't want to get trapped in his comfort zone, because it's easy to start second-guessing yourself, to think, maybe I should message him first, or he clearly still cares, so maybe I need to do something. And hey, if you want to reach out, you can. There's nothing wrong with initiating, especially if it brings you clarity. But I want you to be conscious of why you're doing it. Are you reaching out because you truly want to reconnect? Or are you reacting to a breadcrumb trail he's leaving behind because it's keeping you emotionally hooked? You deserve more than someone watching from the shadows. You deserve someone who shows up fully, who communicates directly, who doesn't leave you wondering what a story view means, or why they won't just send a simple message. Watching your life from behind a screen isn't effort, it's hesitation disguised as attention. It's a maybe, not a yes. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't something real there. It doesn't mean he's not thinking about you. In fact, his behavior might be the clearest sign he's hoping for some form of connection, but he's afraid to make the first move, And here's where your power comes in. You get to decide what to do with that. You can let it play out longer, see if he eventually finds his courage. Or you can take the leap, break the ice, and see what's really there. Not for validation, but for closure or clarity or connection, whatever you need. But just know, silence mixed with subtle signs isn't a game. It's a man torn between wanting to reach out and fearing what he'll find when he does. So, yes, when he's consistently watching your stories without saying a word, there's a good chance he's waiting for you to reach out. But the question isn't whether he's waiting, it's whether you're done waiting. You ever notice how someone brings up something that feels a little too specific to be random? Like out of nowhere they say, "Remember that coffee place you said you loved?" Or they drop a line from a joke only you two ever used to share. It's not just nostalgia. That's emotional memory at work. People don't randomly recall those things unless they're still emotionally connected to the person attached to them. When someone is truly done with a connection, they don't revisit those shared experiences. They don't poke at the past to see if it still stirs something. But when he mentions things only the two of you talked about, inside jokes, little habits, specific moments, it's often because he's revisiting that emotional space and, more importantly, hoping you'll pick up on it. It's a quiet nudge, a breadcrumb. He's not saying, "I miss you" outright, but emotionally, that's exactly what he's doing. Let's say you had a conversation once about how much you both hated slow walkers. Silly, right? But if weeks later, he messages you saying, "Just got stuck behind someone, walking at snail pace, thought of you," that's not about slow walkers. That's about connection. He's trying to spark something that reminds you of the chemistry you had. That line, that's not random. That's precision. That's care. And that's someone who's mentally looping you into their present moment while hoping you'll loop them into yours. This is important because often people think that if he's not outright saying, "I miss you," or "let's talk," then he must be over it. But that's not how emotionally intelligent or hesitant people operate. Sometimes they're still vulnerable, still unsure, still waiting for a signal from you. So they test the waters in a way that feels safe to them. And using shared memories, that's one of the safest ways to say, "I'm still thinking of you," without the risk of rejection. We live in a world where everyone wants to be cool. No one wants to seem too eager or too emotional, especially in dating. But underneath that surface, there's real feeling. And when someone lets even a piece of that through by bringing up a detail only you would understand, that's vulnerability disguised as casual conversation. And what's powerful about this is how personal it is. Anyone can send a "Hey, how have you been?" message. That's generic. That can go to anyone. But when he brings up your thing, the sushi spot you discovered together, the movie you both couldn't stop quoting, or even that random Sunday where nothing happened but everything felt easy, that's intimate. He's not talking to just anyone, he's talking to you. The you that made that moment meaningful in the first place. This is where you need to pay attention, because sometimes you will receive that kind of message and brush it off. You'll think, "Oh, he's just being friendly." But the truth is, people don't resurrect specific memories for no reason. It costs them something emotionally. It's a risk, even a subtle one. And they wouldn't take that risk unless there was still something there. So when he sends that message, think about what it really means. Think about why he's bringing up that memory. Think about what he's trying to remind you of, not just the event, but how it made you feel, how you made him feel. And don't forget this, sometimes people don't know how to say, "I miss you" in a clean, confident way. So they say it in code. They say it in the language of nostalgia. They say in callbacks to jokes, habits, routines you once shared. And your job is to recognize when a message is more than just a message, when it's actually a quiet knock on the door, hoping you might still be on the other side. So if he's bringing up those moments, the ones that only matter to you two, he's not just remembering, he's reaching. You ever notice how some people seem to just pause their entire dating life after a connection with you? Like suddenly, they're not flirting with anyone else, not going on dates, not putting themselves out there. They're quiet, almost stuck. And at first glance, you might think maybe they're just taking time for themselves. But sometimes it's not about healing or moving on. It's about waiting to see if you will reach out. See, when a guy hasn't moved on publicly or privately, when there's no trace of a new woman in his photos, no casual comments under someone else's selfies, no flirty posts, no signs of emotional availability elsewhere, that's often a strong sign he's emotionally still anchored to you. He might be out there living his life, but when it comes to romance, he's benched himself. And it's not because there's a shortage of options. It's because the one option that meant something hasn't been closed off in his mind yet. Here's the thing. When someone is genuinely done, they start making moves consciously or unconsciously to clear emotional space. That might mean dating someone new, deleting old messages, unfollowing, distancing themselves from mutual friends, whatever it takes to emotionally detach and make peace with the past. But when someone is waiting, they're in limbo. They may not even realize it, but they're subconsciously holding the space open in case you walk back in. This kind of emotional pause is one of the most subtle but powerful signs someone hasn't let go. Think about it. If you broke things off, or the communication just faded out, and he hasn't initiated a new chapter in his romantic life, it might not be because he's over it. It might be because you still hold the pen. What's fascinating is how people express this in really small ways. He might not post much at all. He might stay under the radar, keeping things quiet, because he doesn't want to create a perception that he's moved on. He doesn't want to send the message that you don't matter. Sometimes he's even afraid that if he makes it look like he's fine without you, you won't feel a need to reach out. You'll see it in the silence, the lack of closure, the gentle orbiting, watching your stories, liking your posts, every now and then, occasionally popping into your digital world without ever actually stepping fully into it. He's keeping himself visible, but just enough to stay on your radar. Never too much, never too little. Because in his head, maybe you just need time. Maybe you just need a little nudge. Maybe you're waiting too. This is where it gets tricky. Because you might be thinking, if he really wanted to talk to me, he'd message me. And normally, that's true. But sometimes ego, pride, or fear of rejection get in the way. Especially if he thinks he already made the last move. Especially if he's trying to protect himself from looking desperate. He's caught in this emotional limbo where he wants to hear from you, but he doesn't want to ask to hear from you. And so he waits, not fully moving on, but not making a move either, hoping silently that you'll break the silence first. Now, this doesn't mean you have to reach out. That's your decision. You have to ask yourself, is this something worth reopening? Is this someone who added value to your life? Because sometimes someone not moving on doesn't mean they're right for you. It just means they're not ready to let go. But if your gut tells you there's something unfinished, if part of you still feels the connection and wonders what could happen if you sent that message, then maybe his pause is your invitation, not an obligation, just an opening. Because when someone hasn't emotionally moved on, they're not just waiting around. They're quietly holding on to hope. They're protecting a space in their heart they think still belongs to you. And the moment you reach out, that pause breaks. That emotional breath they've been holding is finally released. They don't even have to say it out loud. You'll feel it in how quickly they reply, in the relief in their tone, in the ease that flows back into the conversation. So if you're asking yourself, is he waiting for me to reach out? Look at what he hasn't done just as much as what he has. Sometimes the loudest sign is the quietest behavior. Sometimes not moving on says everything. You know what's interesting? Sometimes when someone's not reaching out directly, it's not because they've moved on. It's because they're afraid. They're scared that if they send that message and you don't respond, or you respond coldly, it'll confirm their worst fear, that the door is closed. So instead, they do something that's a little sneakier, a little more subtle. They start checking in through mutual friends. Now, this doesn't always look obvious at first. It can be as simple as them casually asking someone how you've been. Hey, how's she doing? Or have you talked to her recently? They might not even mention your name at first. It might just be this vague curiosity. But underneath that, there's something much more specific happening. It's emotional reconnaissance. They're testing the water without jumping in. Why? Because reaching out directly feels vulnerable. It's risky. It's exposing. But asking a friend, that's safe. It gives them just enough information to know where they stand without putting their heart fully on the line. And the thing is, if a guy has genuinely lost interest, he doesn't ask. He doesn't care. He's focused on the next thing, the next person, the next chapter. But if he's asking about you, even if it's through someone else, it's because a part of him is still emotionally invested. He wants to know if you're thinking about him, if you're dating someone new, if you still talk about him. That curiosity comes from connection. And sometimes it's the clearest sign he hasn't moved on. People don't always realize how loud their silence can be, especially when they're trying to make it seem like they're fine. But when someone is going out of their way to find out what you're up to, that's not indifference. Think about it. If someone asks your best friend about you, they know that word is going to get back to you eventually. It's almost like a little signal flare they're sending up. I'm still here. Are you? And the friend, they become the in-between. Sometimes they even become the messenger. You might hear something like, he was asking about you the other day, or he seemed really curious if you're okay. And it's not just small talk. That's someone trying to reconnect without making the first bold move. And it's important to recognize it for what it is. Hesitation wrapped in hope. See, people don't stop caring just because they stop communicating. Sometimes they stop communicating because they care too much, because they're unsure if they're welcome in your world anymore, and so they hover. Not because they don't want you, but because they're afraid they already lost you. So they ask. They fish for clues. They hope a little piece of information will give them permission to reach out, or at least give them closure without having to risk being rejected all over again. But let's be honest, this kind of behavior can be frustrating. It's like, if you want to talk to me, just talk to me. And I get that. I really do. But sometimes we have to look past the behavior and ask what's really going on here. Because when someone's ego is bruised, when their pride is on the line, they don't always act directly, they act cautiously. And checking in through friends, that's cautious interest. That's emotional self-preservation. That's someone saying, I still care, but I need to know if I'm safe. The question is, what do you want to do with that information? Do you wait for him to grow the courage to say something himself? Do you reach out and break the silence? Or do you take that subtle sign as closure and keep moving? There's no right or wrong answer, only what aligns with your boundaries and your heart. But don't mistake his silence for apathy if you're hearing that he's still asking about you, because that tells you everything. He hasn't let go. He just doesn't know if he's allowed to hold on. You know what's one of the clearest signs that he's been waiting for you to reach out? Is how he reacts when you actually do. Let's say you've been going back and forth in your mind, wondering, should I text him? Should I just leave it? Am I imagining all of this? And then finally, after all the overthinking and hesitation, you decide to press send. Maybe it's something simple. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay. You're not pouring your heart out. You're not writing a novel, just a gentle check-in. And then, boom, he replies within seconds, not minutes, seconds. And it's not a cold, dry response either. It's not, hey, or yeah, I'm good. It's something with energy, with curiosity, with warmth. It's like the message woke him up emotionally, like he's been in standby mode, just waiting for something to happen. And in that moment, what you see is this burst of emotional momentum, because what's really happening isn't just a reply to a message, it's a release of pent-up hope. That fast, engaged response, that's not by accident. That's someone who has been holding back, someone who's wanted to say something but didn't want to appear too forward or too vulnerable or too desperate. So instead, they've been waiting, silently hoping that you'd make the first move. Now, here's what's important to understand. When someone wants to hear from you, and they finally do, they don't sit there pretending to be busy for the sake of ego. Their emotional reflex is to respond, to show up, to reopen the connection. And that speed, that enthusiasm, it tells you everything. What's even more interesting is what often happens after that first message. You'll notice he doesn't just reply, he engages. He starts asking questions. He mirrors your tone, maybe even escalates it. You might have said, hope you're doing okay. And he hits back with, I've actually been thinking about you too. Funny timing, or I was literally going to message you yesterday. That's not coincidence. That's someone who's been mentally circling your name, looking for the right moment. And now that you've created that opening, he's diving in. Why? Because some people, especially those who are emotionally invested, hold back out of fear. They don't want to come across as clingy. They don't want to scare you off. They tell themselves, if she wanted to talk, she would reach out. And meanwhile, you're telling yourself, if he wanted to talk, he would reach out. And so both of you sit in this limbo, staring at your phones, thinking about each other, but saying nothing. That's why one message, just one, can unlock everything. But let's also be real. Sometimes you reach out and it's not like that. Maybe he replies hours later. Maybe it's a dry one-word answer. Maybe he doesn't respond at all. And that right there is your answer too. Because a person who's been waiting for you will never make you feel like your message was a burden. They won't be lukewarm. They won't leave you hanging. They'll meet your energy or exceed it. This is the beautiful thing about truth. When you take a small action, it reveals what's real. You don't have to obsess for days, analyzing every moment, every emoji from weeks ago. Just one act of courage, reaching out, can tell you what you've been dying to know. And look, I'm not saying you have to message him. I'm not saying the ball is in your court. I'm saying that if you're considering it, if your intuition is whispering, I feel like he's still there, and you just want to know, sometimes the only way to get clarity is to make a move, a tiny, brave move. Because the right person, the one who's been quietly hoping you'll reach out, isn't going to punish you for the silence. They're going to be grateful the silence is over. So if you do reach out and he responds like he's been waiting for that exact moment, believe it, that wasn't luck, that was alignment.